Hey everybody, welcome to the Fantasy Football Endgame. My name is Pierre. Me and my partner Chris are here every single week to help you win at fantasy football. That is our endgame. And so we're going to talk about some wide receiver rankings here for the rest of the season after week 3 to help you know who are the top guys at the position that could carry your team to victory. Now, before we get into that, don't forget to check out all the useful information in the description below. We have some links that you might want to check out, including information on how to join our Discord server where we keep the conversation going all day and all night. And don't forget that we also have two start-sit shows to help you build winning lineups every weekend. One on Saturday night that's open to everybody, and then Sunday morning for our patrons. If you want to know how to get in on that, of course, check out the links below. All right, so now let's go over the top 20 receivers I have in my rest of season rankings, again, from week 3 beyond. So at number 1, we'll start with a familiar name, and that is Davante Adams. Look, I'll admit I did not have Davante Adams as my number 1 receiver in preseason from the drafts. He wasn't the number 1 guy. It was somebody that we'll get to pretty soon. But I think we've seen enough now after the second game to see why Davante Adams was the top fantasy receiver last year and on a per game basis the year before. Well, you know, Aaron Rodgers he likes to take a little mini vacation on the season opener. He's done that the last couple of years. He likes to kind of ease into things and then get everybody all panicked, and then he can tell us to relax. So I think that he's got that out of his system. There's nothing to worry about. Now, I'm not going to say Davante Adams will do what he did last year. He's not probably going to score 18 touchdowns, and he's not a shoo-in to be the top fantasy receiver. But again, after getting that dud out of the way and just seeing how everything clicked, there's really no reason to rank him lower. I get that they're not going to play the Lions every week, but again, they actually had a tough matchup in week 1 defensively against New Orleans. They will be fine. There's no reason to worry. So Adams, number 1, is pretty solid. Number 2, the ever-reliable Tyreek Hill. Look, he's going to have his down games once in a while, but those booms more than make up for it. This is a guy who could go off for 150, 200 yards in a given week. That's what wins you weeks. That's what wins you leagues. So the ups outweigh the downs for sure. And I think you can't really have Tyreek Hill much lower, if at all. So he's number 2 for me. Number 3 is going to be the reliable Stephon Diggs. Nice to see that he got in the end zone at least once already. That was kind of the only issue with him last year. Scored about 6 touchdowns, and even though he led the league in receptions and yardage, not finding the end zone as frequently. Josh Allen not looking quite as sharp as he did last year. That's to be expected, at least a little bit of regression. But again, there's really nothing to worry about here. Diggs is definitely his go-to guy. And then number 4, let's go with DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, this guy's always going to be a target hog. I know that Rondale Moore all of a sudden outproduced him in week 2. I'm pretty sure that's not going to happen going forward. Hopkins is the guy, and we saw what he did in week 1. I mean, Kyler Murray's already making his case to be an MVP candidate. This offense is looking better than ever. So really solid number 4 pick at Hopkins. And then at number 5, the guy that I actually had as number 1 in my draft rankings of wide receivers, Calvin Ridley. Now, I'm still keeping faith in Ridley. I know the Falcons have looked really rough the first couple of weeks, but you have to consider the competition too. This Eagles defense is pretty good. Took a shot here with Brandon Graham out for the foreseeable future, but still, Eagles are improved on defense. You know, Falcons, they came out rusty, all right? And then week 2, well, pretty tough defense there to go against in Tampa Bay. Things will get a little easier for Atlanta. They're going to finally, find things that click. One thing that you should be reassured about, and again, the process here, why did I have Ridley number 1? He led the league in targeted air yard percentage last year. That means out of all the air yards that were thrown, he had the biggest chunk out of any receiver for his team. Now, Julio Jones did miss half the season, almost 7 games last year. Well, even with Julio there, though, half the year, Ridley was still the leader out of all receivers in getting that portion of his team's yardage. And now Julio was gone. They didn't replace him with anybody else of significance at wide receiver. Pitts is there, but he's a tight end. It's still not the same as having a guy like Julio. And Matt Ryan is still there. They didn't add anybody of significance. At running back, Mike Davis, sorry, apologies to you. But again, that's not going to make it. So this is a ground and pound team. They're still not going to be very good defensively. Ridley is going to get targeted a ton. He's going to get a ton of air yards, and that's how you chase production. You look for the targets and you look for the air yards. So Ridley still has that in the bank. I think he will be fine going forward. I'm backing off a little bit because I want to see that Matt Ryan still has it and that this team is just not that bad that they hold him back. But again, I think Ridley still has to be in this top tier. All right, moving on here to tier number 2. Let's go with Scary Terry at number 6. That's Terry McLaurin, or as Chris says, McLaurin F1, because he's got the Jets look. I know that Taylor Heineke isn't your ideal option at quarterback. He looks pretty good there in week 2. We'll see what he has going forward, but what was encouraging is the fact that McLaurin was targeted quite a bit, and in that game, Heineke's first start of the season, McLaurin was productive. So I don't think there's anything to worry about. Again, this is a guy who's going to get the lion's share of production on his team, so nothing to worry about there with McLaurin. All right, another guy that I know I was really high on in the preseason, and I'm not backing down here, is DK Metcalf. Maybe he won't finish as a top 3 receiver in fantasy, but he's still top 10 for sure. I have him 7th right now. Look, I know that it's been the Tyler Lockett show so far in Seattle, but you should know that as of the first 2 games, Lockett and Metcalf actually have the exact same target percentage, 30.7%. Metcalf's being targeted just as much. It's just Lockett's the one who happened to find his way again, open really deep down the field and made those big splash plays. Metcalf's commanding more coverage. Lockett, give him credit. Look, the guy knows how to get open. Russell Wilson obviously trusts him. But that's not a reason to be down on Metcalf. It's not like Metcalf did absolutely nothing. 60 yards on a touchdown. That's still okay, but the best is yet to come. Trust me, we will see Metcalf have a breakout game. Maybe this weekend, we'll see. But again, not backing down at all for Metcalf. He is a physical specimen. He is tied to a really good quarterback, and there's no reason to worry about him going forward. Just because Tyler Lockett happened to have a monster game doesn't say anything bad about Metcalf. And they really don't have a third receiver that you need to worry about anyways. So again, Metcalf, a solid number 7 there. Justin Jefferson, are we worried about a third receiver now in KJ Osborne? Well, Osborne actually has outproduced Jefferson, meaning more yards than him. And the first 2 games, Osborne has been better in fantasy, even though he was 0% rostered until now. Well, Justin Jefferson is still leading the team in targets. I know that's going to sound old, but that is how you find production. You go for the guy who is actually getting targeted by his quarterback, and Jefferson is the lead receiver in that sense in Minnesota. He will be just fine. He had a fine week in week 2. So going forward, again, no reason to worry here. Jefferson is obviously a stud. Now, someone who's moved quite a bit up in the rankings for a good reason is Cooper Kupp. We knew that Matt Stafford would help this offense. We didn't know exactly how much it would help Cooper Kupp specifically, and Robert Woods dropping down. You'll notice he's not in my top 20. Now, I'm not panicking on Robert Woods. I'm not trading him away. I'm not benching him. He will be fine, but it should be noted that so far after 2 games, again, this is a small sample size, but so far in 2 games, Cooper Kupp is tied for the NFL lead in receptions with 16. And this is a guy who is just having monster game after monster game so far. Don't think it's going to slow down necessarily. We know Stafford has that gunslinger mentality. It's also worth noting that the Rams, according to Fantasy Pros, have the easiest strength of schedule for wide receivers for this season. That's good to know because, again, matchups matter, individual matchups, but also team schedules. Now, that can change. Strength of schedule, of course, depends on the team's record, and that will fluctuate. But as of right now, on pace to have the easiest schedule for receivers specifically, which is another reason to keep the faith in Woods. But Kupp right now, he's looking like a top 10 receiver easily. And then at number 10, Allen Robinson. You have to be a little bit worried about what you've seen so far because Andy Dalton is just not it. So Justin Fields taking over. He's going to start for sure in week 3. Is that a good thing? It should be good for the team. Is it good for the fantasy production of the receivers like Robinson? We'll see. Because, Fields brings, obviously, that strong arm, and he's going to bring that athleticism. He'll be able to make plays with his legs. But that also worries me because if he makes plays with his legs, he's not targeting his receivers downfield. He's making mistakes. That's just bad for the offense in general. So I like Fields as a long-term project. Do I love him right now? Well, we'll see. But again, Robinson, he's been quarterback proof his whole career, so I can't take him out of my top 10 and I can't ever bench him. Now, let's go to the next group here. I have number 11 is Keenan Allen. I mean, what more can you say? This guy's a pro every single season getting it done. He's going to be the top target going forward for Justin Herbert, who looks even better so far in year 2. Mike Williams didn't make this list because, well, we need to see more, right? So far, it looks like Mike Williams might become the guy. I don't think that's going to happen, but still, love Mike Williams the rest of the season. I'm not ready to put him in the top 20 just yet, but you should be starting him for sure. A.J. Brown comes in next at number 12. A.J. Brown, a lot of people worried about Ryan Tannehill. I'm not sure why, because I believe in the last game he just threw for well over 300 yards and looked pretty good doing it and led his team to victory. But while Derrick Henry kind of led the team to victory. But still, you shouldn't really be worried about one down game. Brown was still targeted the most in week 1 by far when Julio disappeared. Brown, it just had an off game. He had that bad drop. They try to get Julio involved. It happens. But again, Brown is a guy that he'll have some down weeks, but any given play, he can take it to the house. We've seen that happen so many times. So again, there's really nothing to worry about here with Brown. Just because Julio's there, it doesn't take away from him. It might actually make him better. All right. Chris Godwin, a guy that I love. I think that there's nothing that says that all 3 receivers in Tampa Bay can't be fantasy starters. Now, here's the thing. Godwin and Evans and Antonio Brown, all 3 of them so far have produced at times. Are they all 3 going to produce at once? No. So there will be some ups and downs. Hey, we say this about all these guys, right? What player is going to produce every single week, week in and week out? Godwin so far has been the one that has been the steadiest. And I say so far it's 2 games. I know that. But, Mike Evans is the one who seems to be a lot more matchup dependent. He can get rattled, shut down by a top corner. Antonio Brown is technically the 3rd receiver. He could get phased out at times based on game script. I think Godwin is the one who is, probably least affected by matchup and game script. I think he's the number 1 technically there. So I have him the highest. I have him 13. He's got to be a top 15 receiver this year. And then I have CeeDee Lamb next. Again, a guy that I think is going to have a breakout year. So between Lamb and Cooper, you see a little farther down, I have Cooper 2 spots lower. So why is Lamb ahead of him? Well, Cooper had that huge season opener, and after 2 weeks, Lamb has 22 more yards than him. Lamb and Cooper are both among the top 5 in targets because, well, the Cowboys are going to have to throw a ton all year long, so you have to love both these guys. But Lamb, I just like a little bit more because, again, I think that he's the one who's going to run those intermediate routes while Cooper stretches the field more. Lamb is probably more liable to produce a higher catch rate. Cooper does get banged up a little bit here and there too, more likely that he might miss a game. So Lamb gets a slight edge here. And then at 15, I already talked about Tyler Lockett. Lockett, what can you say right now? Number 2 in the NFL in yardage. It's not going to be that way in the end of the season, but this is a guy who still probably gets undervalued by a lot of people, including myself, just because he's not a young up-and-coming receiver. He's just steady, and you know what? We've seen some of those up and downs kind of dissipate, lately. He's mellowing out a little bit, and he's a guy who I think is going to receive that steady target share that you crave. All right, now let's go on to the final group here. 16 through 20, I got Amari Cooper, 16. I already mentioned him, 16 receptions, the same as CeeDee Lamb. And, he's a guy who is going to be productive. Also should know both Cowboys receivers going to see a bump because no Michael Gallup for at least a couple of weeks. He's on IR. That helps the 2 primary receivers. And then at 17, we have DJ Moore. A lot of people were down on DJ Moore because they didn't know what they're going to get with Sam Darnold. Well, I think we know what we're going to get now with Sam Darnold, a pretty good quarterback who was a first-round pick. And he's not in New York, and it seems like that's it. That's all that you needed to do is just get him out of the Jets and into a better system, and lo and behold, see what happens. Now for the last 3 picks here, I'm going to go with a Chris special. That is Courtland Sutton. Nobody was on Courtland Sutton more than my man Chris. And so far, he looks like he was right. Eased him into action in week 1 because, of course, coming off the ACL surgery, and they're not going to push it. And then week 2 happened, and, the chains were off. Jerry Jeudy, he's hurt now, of course, going to be gone for a few weeks. Courtland Sutton, I'd say he stepped up definitely to be the alpha. 159 yards in week 2. Yes, it was against Jacksonville, but you know what? It doesn't matter because he is going to be the number one receiver there. Teddy Bridgewater looks good. They have a fairly easy schedule the rest of the way, too. And Sutton, after 2 weeks, again, just 2 weeks, but leading the league in air yards. And that's important to know. He's not just running these soft routes. He's not just being used, as the big target underneath. He's stretching the field, which is not something that everyone expected necessarily, especially this year. So Cortland Sutton, I think he's proven he's an every week start now. Definitely healthy. Number 19, I'm going to slide Mike Evans in there. Again, it's just hard to count him out because he's proven it year after year. Sometimes he's had slow starts. Sometimes he's had bust games and everyone gets mad. And then he winds up going over 1,000 yards by the time it's all said and done anyways. The way Tom Brady looks, you cannot keep this guy on your bench. Maybe against the Rams this week, but that would be it. I think every other week you just have to start Evans and you just have to trust in him. And then finally, number 20, this was so hard. Who to keep out of this list? Some guys almost made it. Debo, I'm a big fan of. And right now, Debo, after the first couple of weeks, leading the league in yardage and target share. But Brandon Ayuk, I think, will eventually make an appearance. And we don't know exactly what the quarterback situation is going to be rest of the year. So just a little bit of question mark there with a Debo. So he just misses the cut. And I am a big fan of T. Higgins. I'm not a big fan of that offensive line for Cincinnati and the fact that he still has two really good receivers that he's competing with. So Higgins is a wide receiver too for me. Just doesn't quite make the top 20 list because who did make the cut is Adam Thielen. So I really think we're going to see just as good of a season from Thielen as we did a year ago. Everyone wants to proclaim Justin Jefferson, the top dog there in Minnesota. And maybe he will be, in terms of targets right now, he is. But in terms of fantasy points, it's going to be pretty much a wash between these two because we're still seeing Thielen getting those end zone targets and those touchdowns. He's still making plays downfield as well. And so Adam Thielen is maybe a little older than the rest of these guys on this list, but he's still just as productive. And I think Kirk Cousins also still being underrated. You have to like what you see so far out of that offense. All right, so those are my top 20 wide receiver rankings for the rest of the season. Hopefully this helped you. If you have questions about any of this, do a couple of things. Number one, you can leave a comment right here on this channel and we'll try to answer it as soon as we can, or join our Discord. Again, the link is in the description below and you can join the discussion all season long. We love to help you out. All right, thanks for watching.